Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be covering the book of Ezra. Now, I just want to go ahead and say this. I don't know if there's going to be any people complaining that the video is not long. This book of the Bible is only 10 chapters. It's a relatively short book of the Bible. It's not very long. But yeah, before we cover the book of Ezra, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because these videos actually take a really long time to make and you'd be doing me the biggest favor if you actually did do those things. But without further ado, let's cover the book of Ezra. So a king named Cyrus ruled a big place called Persia, whatever. And then God told him, you need to make it to where the Israelites can go back home. And yeah, what a good start. They had been away from their home for a very long time because another king had, took it away from them, which, bad. Maybe don't do that. Ever thought about that? I don't know. Cyrus then says, God wants me to build his house in Jerusalem. This was a really big thing for the Israelites, meaning, they could go home back to Jerusalem. And yeah, they could go home, Very cool. Many people got ready to leave, and not only were they ready to leave, they were excited because, they could return home and build God's temple. Some people actually stayed, but they gave, silver and gold to the people who were leaving just to help them out. A long time ago, the enemy had taken away a lot of, the Israelite stuff, and then the king of currently, was like, yo, you can have it all back. Good works, yeah. More specifically, they took God's items or his special items like silver and gold, stuff like that. And then a chosen leader named Sheshbazzar, that's his actual name. Oh, by the way, I just want to go ahead and say this. I always try and make this a disclaimer. If I am saying the names wrong, please forgive me. I don't mean to say them wrong. But yeah, Sheshbazzar was the chosen leader to lead basically the Israelites back to Jerusalem. And he made sure that the gold and the silver was safe. And yeah, good leader. Good lad. And then a long journey commences where they just pack their stuff and they get ready to go back home. And they were excited because they got to rebuild God's house and, long journey. And then when they got back to Jerusalem, they basically kept a big list of the people who had returned and also families and how many people were in the families. This just basically helped keep track of who came back to Jerusalem. It also helped them learn who was a part of God's chosen people. The list also contained a lot of leaders and helpers, more specifically the priests and the Levites. The priests were basically responsible for taking care of the temple and the duties inside of it, and the Levites were basically responsible of leading the people into worship, and they also sung songs, so yeah. That's good. Some people weren't sure if they were actually a part of God's chosen people, so they decided to wait before they got given any type of specific or chosen job, which, you should do. They couldn't work in God's house until the priests decided what they wanted to do. Or not decided what they wanted to do, just decided what to do in general. When the people got back to Jerusalem, they gave gifts to basically help rebuild the temple, and yeah, that was thumbs up. Thumbs up, let's go. After the gifts were giving, they started settling in their own homes, they went back to their own towns, and they were basically getting settled in the land that God gave them so long ago. When the people finally got back into Jerusalem, the first thing they did was to build an altar so where they could give gifts to God. Also, it's important for me to note this, they were scared of the enemies around them, but they knew that the worship of God had to come first. They started giving burnt offerings to God. This was their way of saying, thank you and sorry, stuff like that. They also celebrated the Festival of Booths. This is basically where they would live in tents, basically just to remind themselves of how God helped them, because back then they lived in tents and, yeah. Basically to remember how God took care of their people a long time ago. They also gave offerings like God had told them in their laws, and yeah. They wanted to do everything the right way to make God happy. And then they started gathering supplies for the temple, so everything that you would assume to build the temple, so cedar wood, oil, stone, stuff like that. They also gave food and oil to the workers, because, when you're building a temple for God, you tend to get tired, so yeah, I'm pretty sure why that's, yeah. And after months, they finally laid down the foundation of the building of the temple, and the people were very happy. The priests actually dressed in fancy clothing, and the other people started singing and giving praises to God. a lot of them started shouting and crying, especially the old people or the older people. They looked at the temple and started crying because it wasn't as grand as it used to be. So yeah, when they were crying and they were shouting. It was mixed together and you could hear it from far, far away. And believe it or not, their enemies actually tried joining them, but like some of them were like, no, this is only for God's chosen people. More specifically, it was the people of Zebulabali. I'm sorry. Zerubabel. I don't know. Please, forgive me. And the enemies could not join their, like, building process. They got very angry, and they tried scaring the workers to get them to stop. Which, meanies, you're mean. Why would they want to do that? And then they wrote a very mean letter to the king of Artaxerxes. If that is not how you pronounce this dude's name, I don't know what to tell you. I'm just gonna call him Axe. So they basically sent a mean letter to King Athraxiax, or however you say that dude's name, and they basically told them that the people weren't actually building what they said they were building. They're building a city to rebel against you, and they're also going to stop paying taxes to you, and they're going to rebel. And yeah. Basically telling King Athrax that they won't pay taxes and that they will rebel against him, and that he will also lose control. And then the king believed the lies, and he basically sends a letter or a message to them basically saying, hey, stop building it now until I say so. I have a ego problem. And then the work stopped, and then it was like that for many years. So, like, they get word of it and then go to Jerusalem. They're like, stop building, and they just halt the building of God's house, and it was like that for many years. And then after they stopped building the temple for many years, God sent 2 prophets to Jerusalem to basically encourage the people. The 2 prophets were named Haggai and Zechariah. Finally, 2 pronounceable names. And basically, the 2 prophets tell them, hey, resume building the temple. Don't be afraid of them, because God is with you. That is probably going to be the easiest thing I have ever said throughout the episode of this. And then the people started working again, because, God had told them, rebuild the temple, so, they're not gonna try disobeying God, so they worked very hard to rebuild the temple. And then the governors started asking, hey, quick question, why are you guys rebuilding all that? And then they responded by saying it was God's work, and that the king had allowed them to do it. And then the leaders sent a message to King Darius, that's his name, basically sending a message to King Darius, basically trying to confirm if, he actually gave the word on if they were allowed to do that or not. They just wanted to make sure. King Darius read the letter, and then he sent his servants to go get the old law that basically said that they could do this. They found it, but it was in a library far, far away. Yeah. And then King Darius read the old decree, and he basically said, yes, they are allowed to rebuild the temple, and if anyone tries to stop them, they will be punished. Very cooperable. Is that even a word? Cooperative. I meant to say cooperative. Oh my goodness, man. My vocabulary. I need to... And then, surprisingly, the king supports the rebuilding of the temple. He also says that, he'll basically pay for it, is what he tried to say, from the king's treasury. Now, the enemies cannot stop the work because King Darius is on their side, basically saying that if anyone intervenes with their work, they will be punished. Also, the funds for this will be, funded by the king's treasury. So, yeah. And then after many, many years, the temple is finished, and it was ready to be God's house again. Which, yeah, pretty dope. Did you like the video so far? I really do hope you guys like these videos. They take a really long time to make. And then the people basically celebrate, and they offered sacrifices to God, and they also celebrated the Passover, basically of which God brought them out of Egypt. So, yeah. And then the temple is dedicated entirely to God, and they made everything to where God liked it and the way God wanted it. And the priests, the Levites, and the people came together to, do this. They came together to praise God and all that he has done. Ezra was a priest and a teacher of God's laws. He knew the scriptures really well, and one day, King Artaxerxes of Persia decided to send Ezra to a place to teach these people God's laws. He wanted to send Ezra to Jerusalem. And then the king gives Ezra a bunch of support, so he's giving him stuff, and he gave him gold, silver, some supplies for the journey, and he also gave him the authority to choose leaders. and to make sure that God's law was followed. Ezra came from a long line of priests, specifically going all the way back to Aaron and Moses. This made him very special because he was, a direct descendant of the first priest chosen by God. Ezra had a plan to bring the people back to God. He knew it was not going to be easy, and he also made sure that the king knew of his plan and that it was, given to him by God. And then the king basically wrote a decree saying that Ezra had the power to teach God's laws, choose judges, and give decisions about the law in Jerusalem. The king also told everyone that they should follow Ezra's instructions. And then Ezra prepares to go, and then as he's on his way, he also, teaches the importance of obeying God along the way as they're heading to Jerusalem. Basically teaching them of the importance of obeying God. Basically making sure that everybody knew that. And then Ezra gathered up a big group of people that wanted to go from Babylon to Jerusalem. And then he made a list, and the list basically counted the amount of people that were there. Also, important people, like families, priests, Levites, stuff like that. So everybody was safe and accounted for, which good on you, Ezra. Look at you. Look at you, Ezra. Look at you, Ezra-ing. Yeah. You're awesome, Ezra. Good on you, Ezra. And then they prepared for the long journey, so they got stuff they got supplies, stuff like clothes, food, stuff like that, because they were going to go on a very long journey, and this was going to take time. Even with all the supplies, Ezra knew that the journey was going to be rough, so he prayed to God that they, praying to God for, protection and, stuff like that, which, good on Ezra. That's very wise. Ezra and the people prayed for God to keep them safe along the way. Because everybody prayed with their hearts, they felt brave knowing that God was watching over them. And Ezra prays to God, protection, yes. Ezra trusted that God would protect them from any dangers along the way. And this also helped everybody feel strong and united on their journey to, where they were going. And, they started the journey. Their hearts were filled with joy, and because they thought, God is going to protect us, and we're going to get through this, and everything is going to be jolly, jolly. When Ezra arrived, he was told very upsetting news that some of the men of Israel had married women from other nations. If you're wondering why this is a problem, it goes against God's law, and, Ezra being sent there to practically preach God's law, I'm pretty sure you could guess how he felt. Ezra felt so sad and ashamed that he actually tore up his clothes and pulled his own hair out of his head. And then he prays to God, asking God to forgive them, and that, they haven't followed his ways, now they're in trouble. And in this prayer, Ezra didn't try to cover up anything. He just, was honest to God. He was like, God, we messed up. This is terrible, but please help us on this. Just please help us do what you want us to do, and just please help us be better. And then they heard Ezra praying, and surprisingly, they felt guilty about it. So, they went to the leaders of the people, and they're like, hey, we need to change our ways, and we need to follow the way of God. We need to follow his ways again. Basically, we need to make things right, and we need to, ask God for forgiveness. After hearing Ezra's prayer, they all come together, and they have one big meeting. They talked about stuff like how it was wrong to, marry a woman that didn't worship God. They thought it was terrible, and they wanted to change their ways. So they gathered to make a decision together. And Ezra gets up, and then he starts speaking to some people, and he's basically telling them that it was wrong, and a man from Israel shouldn't be marrying a woman that didn't worship God. And he went on to go about how, bad, shouldn't do that. Basically, that it was wrong to marry a woman from another nation who did not worship God or believe in him. And the people agreed to fix it. And how they fixed it was they sent their foreign wives and children away from them. They just sent them out of, whatever place they were in. And this was a very hard decision for them because, it's their wives and children. Basically, they sent away their wives and children, to be faithful to God and to change their ways. The leaders and the priests actually guided the people who lost their wives and children when they were sent away. And they basically, guided them on how to handle this difficult decision. And each person who had married someone from a different nation stepped up and explained their situation. And over time, one by one, they all sent their foreign wives and children away so that they could follow God. Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that was the book of Ezra. I just want to go ahead and say this. If to the people that, there might be people complaining that the video was not longer, it was only 10 chapters. It was not a long book. I just want to go ahead and say that. But, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe because these videos actually take a really long time to make and you'd be doing me the biggest favor if you actually did do those things. But yeah, I hope you're having an amazing day or night. I love you. God loves you. Yeah, I feel like that's about it. Wait, also, we're about to hit 100,000 subscribers. At the time of this recording, we got about 60,000 subscribers. So if you subscribe, please do that. You'd be doing me a very big favor, and thank you for it. I greatly appreciate it. But, I feel like that's about it. I thank you, I love you, and God bless.